Well, good evening. I guess I'm live, I guess. Hello. Good evening. There's a lot happening, it seems like. That, of course, I only find out about things sometimes weeks later. Like these 19 objects that were found that were near Jupiter, between Jupiter and Neptune. And my understanding is that one was flying ahead of the other 18 or 19. I'm not sure if the one was part of the 19. But, and that they were called centaurs. And one person, I was listening to Clyde Lewis on Ground Zero on the radio, and that's where I learned about this. And it's from March, though, I guess that it was first being reported, or as something that NASA was observing. I guess that's how it came down. I don't know exactly all the details about it yet. But they're talking about these as interstellar objects like Oyumama, and I call it Oyumama, and Borisov. Borisov was more recent, but Oyumama was a couple of years ago, I think, now. And Borisov was 21. Was fairly recent, and it may be still visible. Both, there was the first time that they said they saw objects coming from what they believe is a different solar system, and I don't understand exactly how that works. But all the other objects came from other directions. And so that's what was puzzling. And now they're saying that these objects, these 19 objects, are also coming from the same interstellar direction. And that they're trying to trace their orbits, and put them into the computer models, and then they work those models back to see where they would have been, during, 6,000 years ago or whatever, or who knows how far ago, since their estimate of when the planet was brought together. I don't know if they're capable of determining that or not. But next level does leave signs of everything. In archaeology and of course in the stories that we hear from the legends, or the records. Of course the Bible is a big part of those records, and the Torah, and is part of that Bible, but. My understanding of the word Torah is that it means instructions. As the first 5 books of the Bible, and I have to make notice to. Sometimes I tune into a Christian station on the radio, and it's so clear how they've, in many ways, how they've gotten very far afield from what Jesus was teaching. Of course, it's not their fault. It's they hardly stand a chance, Doe said, but they do stand a chance. And so, if anybody knows ways of learning to talk in ways that can help people that have a Christian background. I think that for their sakes, it sounds like, I'm doing it for their sakes, right? It's like I'm a humanitarian or something. And I'm not coming from that point of view. It's not to preserve our humanness. It's to basically participate in the overcoming process so that we can actually graduate to being on a spacecraft with a crew of kind, sensitive, funny, flexible, dedicated crew members to their older members, T and O, with them on spacecrafts. And believe me, that would be about the most pleasant experience you could have. And then you have that for forever. And the ticket to get there means work. It means work in the human kingdom to overcome the things that hold us back from graduating. And those are the things that are in the Heaven's Gate book as the major and lesser offenses, and the 17 steps, and that mostly have to do with working with other people. We all, I think, have experiences working with other people, except now we've been locked together. Well, that actually I don't think is a negative, because of the way that a lot of people have more time now to look into different things and do things that they want to do. Like a friend of mine, because she was making her money through art and all the art events were canceled, qualified because she was doing everything on the books. Well, maybe not everything, I don't know, but she qualifies for, unemployment. And so where every year she's traveling all over the country with her art, and she's on the board of directors of a number of different art organizations and like that. So instead of having to try and take planes and drive all over the country, literally all over the country, a number of times throughout the summer and into the fall, spring, summer, and fall, she gets to stay at home and work with her garden, which is her favorite pastime, and grow food and herbs and things, and being around her daughter. So, so that's a positive. I know, everybody has different circumstances, and it can be very, very hard. I mean, to be threatened with losing your house and all that. That's the criminal aspect to all this. But if they do not require rent to be paid and actually forgive that rent, because if it just becomes a debt, then depending on what state you're in, like if you're in New York, there's probably many people now that still haven't gotten their unemployment checks. Now, I don't know if most people have gotten their stimulus check. I did get $1,200 as part of the stimulus program, and I didn't file for unemployment because I really didn't have that much employment. I lost a few gigs, but I live off of a meager Social Security check, and then some money that I got as a part of an inheritance. So I don't have nearly the problems that a lot of people have, and so it enables me to do a lot of research on every little thing that happens, especially with surrounding the virus, and I don't know if you all stick to the news like I do on that score, and I see everything pretty much. Well, I don't see everything, but I see a lot of stuff, and I pay attention to everything. And it's interesting how the CDC and the WHO are backing down from a lot of things with one side of their mouth, and then with another side of the mouth they leak. Well, the backside is the leak, and then their official view is even relaxed, to where they're saying, okay, now the old people, like in Vermont, they're saying that the old people, Governor Phil Scott just said today that the old people over 65, it's not a law that they can't go out. It's a guidance, a suggestion that they should stay isolated, and if they do go out, to follow different precautions. And I definitely felt like that was out of place to basically blame the elderly vehicles because even if they're more prone in the statistics to getting sick, that's not the only criteria at all. But it's a combination of that and years and years and years of health problems, largely because of the poor diets that is the standard American diet, which is is the diet that some of the people can, the poor people can hardly afford any better than that. But then that becomes a combination with the choices, of course. So we can make a lot of funds in order to eat the heavy proteins, those to call the meats and things like that, and the dairy heavy protein. That give you that satisfaction. And the fats that give that satisfaction, and the sugars that give that satisfaction, which includes the carbohydrates, the complex carbohydrates that are the flours and the grains that are heavily processed, and then the nutrition is mostly destroyed in the oven, and so what we get is the complex carbohydrate, which is the sugar, that ends up promoting diabetes and heart disease, and clogging up our arteries and clogging up everything, and also messing with the polarity of the chemical interactions. All have electromagnetic polarity with them, and if they're not, like the brain waves aren't, they get clogged up. They get it's like when you use a substance, alcohol or pot or other substances, or meths or whatever they are. I haven't used anything stronger than marijuana since I was a kid, but it changes your brain waves. It changes your, some people it puts them to sleep, and to other people it makes them crazy, literally. I mean, they could be groveling on the floor as if they were, totally out of control with their body, and you could be worried about them. I've had that experience with two of my long-range partners that I had while I was living in the world. On both sides of being a member of Tiendo's classroom, which, if you want to see me, if you want to see what I'm talking about, then I suggest you read Sawyer's story on my blog, which is sawyerhg.wordpress.com. Anyway, but so these 19 objects, I don't have any doubt that they are next level. And those are the one that talked about an Armada coming back he would come back with his Armada. I mean, how many ways are they going to show it to us, right? And I know it's hard to believe in a sense, but then at the same time, it's impossible not to believe that it's extremely possible. We're not going to know for sure, but we don't have to know for sure. I mean, it's like you see enough handwriting on the wall to think that, okay, we haven't heard anything about humans being able to, do anything to move asteroids around. I know humans want to try to do it because they want to try to redirect them so that they don't come too close or hit the Earth. Which that is the way it's depicted. One of the last events. Well, the last event in a string of events that are starting in earnest with this plague. Excuse me. Probably shouldn't have ate that little bit of heavy protein that I ate. Got like hiccups. Maybe the water will help. And then there's this thing from Coast to Coast showing the Hexagon on Saturn. I think go to that. I mean, and look at that. I mean, that's amazing. Let me see if I can put it on the screen. I think I can. Let's see here. There it is. And I'll do this. I'm going to get good at this before I leave this vehicle, maybe. I shouldn't have said that. I'm jinxing myself. There you go. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So I don't know if you got it yet. But I'll just leave it up there for a minute and then I'll go back to the other screen. Let's go back to this one, since it's a little different. The first screen, of course, for people that don't know it, that come into this live stream for the first time, was filled with different things cited by NASA and the European Space Agency and different space telescopes. Different land-based telescopes. And let me go back to this other screen now, too. Hey, Kate's Biz and Sours Croat 97 Gaming. I love the lore. The lore, yeah. I love the lore. I shot the sheriff, and the lore won. I never shot a sheriff, and I don't ever recommend it. Guns, weapons made to kill humans with was not from the next level's mind, and so that means it's from the misinformation mind, which is from the dropouts, the renegades, the space aliens, and that's all the space aliens, not just the ones that the so-called good ones say that are the bad ones that are coming to to destroy the planet and take over humanity. When it's actually them, those space aliens, that already took over humanity in a large part, except for the ones that are in the next level's eyes, which can be many, many, many. I don't know what the numbers would be. So they're coming basically right now. They're spading the planet, and those space aliens are assisting and getting the humans to assist with the spading, and so the humans are bringing on the increased death, which the next level knew was going to happen. They're creating famines, right? Because they're saying that the supply chains are falling apart, and all these things. It's like I don't know if some of the humans are aware of it, but it's like they're subconsciously also helping the next level by getting us used to being happy with less. And being content to be in our homes because of all the things that are escalating out there in the world that are threatening our physical and mental health. Now, I don't think it's threatening our mental health to know what's going on. I think it's good that we know what's going on because we don't want to lose touch with that. Because if we want to have the job of standing for tea and dough, then we're going to be talking to people in all different circumstances about why this is all happening. It's because tea and dough, when they left, they said they were always holding it back. The next level was holding it back. They didn't say they were holding it back. They said the next level was holding it back. So they were talking about their older members. We're holding back what the Christians call the tribulation, a time of great trouble since the beginning of the human kingdom. At least for this civilization. That's what the world is to us, is the current civilization. And the word is used a lot of times, world is used a lot of times in the records to indicate the humans on it. Because the planet itself, Doe said it was a perfectly good planet. Could still serve the next level in a number of different capacities. One he said was as a base. He thought that it might go that way. That before there's a new civilization for a graduation potential, there might be a base on that the next level would come and go from. Now they can come and go, and we could actually, the humans that are alive at the time would be able to see them in their vehicles. Then maybe their vehicles would look like those Cocoon movie vehicles. I don't know exactly. They could have different kinds of vehicles, but they could see their spacecrafts. That might look like who knows what. I mean, what they could look like. But I can't talk with any experience about that. But, except that a spacecraft can be a living being itself. Because it can be a vehicle that a graduate, maybe an advanced graduate, someone that's been in the next level and has, grown their mind. It may take a lot more mind to operate a vehicle that has a lot of different functions, like can generate cloud cover, or can take a large amount of water to another planet, or can stimulate tornadoes. So you could have some pretty high-tech instrumentation built into that vehicle that is piloted by a member of the next level, and that member of the next level could also have more than one vehicle. So they could also be in the crew, and they're actually like it's doing two different jobs. They're controlling the spacecraft and all its functions, and they're working with the crew inside, because the focus of the crew is to help humans that are asking for help. And they're given a bunch of instructions on how to, give help to people that ask for different things. And those instructions can be, save them from that disaster. Because they're growing, and they want to take advantage of the time that they have in the human kingdom to grow. That's why suicide is not in the question right now. Nobody should be talking about committing suicide, and T and Do talked about that. Do talked about that, that for them it would have been suicide to stay, because they were being called back, and that can apply still to individuals that were active students, I believe, of the present incarnate older member. Now that older member is not presently incarnate now. So there are no active students. I'm not the one that decides who is an active student and who's not. But just using that terminology that was used by Doe through a number of different documents, and Junodi talked about, and perhaps some others. I haven't actually tried to find all the places where the phrase active student was used. But Doe said this in a lot of different ways on purpose. It wasn't supposed to be said in a certain order, as if it only applied to, people up into the next order. Not order. I don't mean order like, I shouldn't have used the word order, because it's not an order. We get instructions, okay? And that's what the commandments are. They're instructions, and that's what the Torah represents. It represents instructions on how to graduate through the grades in school in the human kingdom. Because we don't graduate unless we're doing an adequate job, according to the next level's judgment, with living by the instructions. Now, some of the Christians get into trouble when they look at those instructions, like say the Ten Commandments, and they think, I can't, I lie, but it doesn't say that thou shalt not lie. It says, thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. In other words, you shouldn't make up lies about your neighbor, that, accuse them of something that you weren't a witness about. That's what they were giving instructions not to do, not to be a snitch. You know what I mean, so to speak? Unless it was part of the program, that if somebody was not following the procedures, you were supposed to report it, and it might have been. And not coveting your neighbor's goods or your neighbor's partner. They said it as wife because they were talking to everybody, but there are different lesson plans for the individuals that are in female vehicles. And the souls, though, they get experience with both, I believe. I don't think that's, I think that's pretty safe to say. Even though I don't remember actually Tiendo saying that directly. Well, they did say, yeah, they did, but I can't just actually hear the words in my head. So I like to try to hear the words in my head before I say it's 100% sure of it. And even then, I shouldn't use 100%, because then it's only the words that we can see that they left behind. That's 100% for everybody. You know, in the Heaven's Gate book and the Beyond Human series and the videotape series and the other videotapes that they made and the other materials that Rick Odie had posted on his website that are available to people, and the audio tapes, about 196 of them, that are chock full of, just happen to be the ones with T in them, the only ones with T in them, which I don't think was a mistake, that Rick Odie and he had helpers like Carl Odie and Pip Odie and working on, and Oscar Odie and Rick Odie was primary on that task. But anyway, so, and then Rick Odie left, one of the four that left after the 39 did. Anyway, so what is it saying with 19 or 20 objects and 4, maybe it's actually 24 objects, they just haven't showed them all yet, the 24 elders. And I would imagine that, they might each have a spacecraft with a crew. It'd be no different than having overseers of a department in Tiendo's classroom. They might have a crew that helps humans that are asking for help with their health. I just had that idea, and it sounds like it might be a probable. And then they may have a crew that does multiple things, of course. Helping people with understanding, that there are beings on other planets, and that they did come here, and they were brought here, but that the next level exists. And that's what is hard to really grasp. Some of the Christians know that the UFOs are the lower forces of the planet. Satan and his angels, or Lucifer, Satan, and their associates, if you want to give them all names, which I don't know if there's actually one of those individuals that took on the name Satan, because what it means in the Hebrew is, it means adversary. Adversary. And Tiendo said that all the students of the classroom were assigned one of those adversaries. In other words, one of those Luciferian fallen angel space alien souls. They're souls. And souls are plasma objects that hold mind, that hold next level mind. But I guess they can hold a certain amount of next level mind, but lose a certain amount of it that gives them recognition of the next level's reality as being an evolutionary step above human, not just another space race like themselves. And that's what I believe Doe indicated that the space aliens think about themselves, that they're another space race. And so that's another thing to help people with. Help them see how there's a difference. Now, how can we prove it to anybody? We can't prove anything to anybody. I mean, I spend a whole bunch of time writing on my channel comments to an individual that wanted me to describe how I think I know certain things. And so I gave it my best shot, and but the bottom line is that it didn't seem to mean anything. But you never can tell when it might be a seed. Not that it benefits me for that person to believe, or him or her to believe in what I believe. It doesn't benefit me at all. I mean, I'm happy when it happens. I definitely am feeling, I really enjoy seeing individuals because we're kin to the same mind. Nobody begins to believe in T and O without having their mind. They do. They have some of their mind in them. And the object is to change the content of the mind of our human mind, the misinformation mind, so that 51%, according to Doe in the Beyond Human series, is next level mind. So that means like, a vehicle wants to drink alcohol. Well, there was no alcohol in the classroom, so I'm going to wean myself from that. Now I can see the daggers being shot at me, that I've said that I sometimes smoke marijuana, and I do. I did today, actually, and which was a week ago that I last did it. I'm doing it a lot less now that I'm isolated in the house, because I used to do it when I would go out to play music, so that wasn't part of the classroom. And but we don't have that classroom now. So, but that doesn't mean that those things can't be part of our discipline. But it's just not proper for somebody else to say that if we're not doing that, we're not growing, or we're not doing as much as we could do. Maybe that's not a problem for my vehicle. That I get, maybe I definitely have other problems. And it's the same with everybody. So somebody can have no problem with anger or sexuality or judgmentalism or, no problems with those things, but have a problem with food, of likes and dislikes, to where changing their diet is like a huge thing to tackle. To like to get onto the transfiguration diet, so that no matter what plagues come along, our vehicles have the best chance of getting through it. Even if we get a little sick, or even a lot sick, if we get through it, then and we used T and Doe's meditations, talking to them, asking them for help. They want us to ask for help, because that's what a crew member does. When you're on a spacecraft and you're given a task and you don't know what to do, you ask your older member for help if you can. Now, your older member isn't always available. I mean, most of the time the older member is not available. So crew members need to then look to each other to come up with decisions so that they do the right thing, and everything becomes meaningful to them. They don't say, well, we can just skip that because like kind of I'm saying. I'm kind of shabby actually to say that. That maybe I don't need that because anybody could use that as an excuse, right? So it is a type of excuse, but I'm just not putting a lot of focus on that because for all I know, it could be right to do in this circumstance. If for instance, let's say, like any substances that can be like that, alcohol included. I don't think there's any substances that aren't opportunities to use on the planet. I mean, when they, are clearly not going to kill you right away. Like, I don't think it's by use. I don't mean put into your body necessarily. Like you wouldn't want, radioactive material in your vehicle or near your vehicle. Well, might be near your vehicle might be good actually. Sometimes, which I learned that from Tiendo from a recent audio tape that I recently listened to. I talked about it in the last live stream a little bit, but that they weren't necessarily against nuclear power. They were against not dealing with the waste in a way that vehicles wouldn't become collateral damage or to the so-called greater good. It's not a greater good if you see somebody get sick because of what you did. Like that's even with the vax, right? I mean, if you do a lot of tests on people and they get sick, well, why keep on doing that? Go back to the lab and try to, figure out a way to, or even scrap that task. There's other things they can do with their lab abilities. I don't know what they are on the top of my head, but because, yeah, that's an example, isn't it? Maybe. I used to always think that, since I've left the classroom, that that humans can't imagine something that's not possible. But see, now that I say that over again, like not, I know that I'm probably wrong about that. The ways to think about that, for what it's worth, it's not really worth anything, really. But, it's like, let's say humans can imagine things that are not possible. Then what might they look like? And I can imagine that, okay, maybe there aren't any humanoid or any creatures that have exactly 51 eyes on their head, where the horseshoe crab has like 11 eyes on its body. He even has an eye on the tip of its tail, which is interesting, and then it's got eyes on the front of the shell, and I don't know if it's got any eyes any place else. But it's pretty neat machine, that kind of crab kind of thing, a horseshoe crab. And they were particularly interesting to me because I was afraid of them when I was a kid, because I grew up on Long Island, my vehicle did, and by Oyster Bay on the South Shore, and we'd go. My vehicle's dad would take me and my cousin and my grandfather and my uncle fishing, and crabbing, and we'd fish for eels and smoke them, in a smoker, and flounder and different blowfish, that were really like chicken, they say, right? Which were, and anyway, so I was raised on that, but in the bay there were these horseshoe crabs, and I don't know if people know what they look like, but they're kind of roundish, and kind of like a little flying saucer, but without the bulb on the top, just like a flat flying saucer, and then they've got this tail that like a spike, and they actually use that tail if they get upside down to flip themselves back over again. And it also looks threatening, so they can hold it up, against somebody, and fish, I think, have that instinct of like sharp teeth and things like that. Means that might get damaged from trying to tangle with this one. And so anyway, so I remember hearing the stories of that if you stepped on the horseshoe crab, you get their tail. They would put their tail into your foot or your leg, and their tail would open up inside your leg, and so that you couldn't pull it out. And maybe that's true. So I was always afraid of them when I was a kid. But anyway, when I started, not too long ago, I was just studying all kinds of things, and I came across that, the amount of eyes that they had. It's like 11 eyes, I think it was. How does that evolve, like automatically, and, the other problem I had with evolution theory from the Darwinians, which Tiendo didn't talk about Darwinian evolution as being a reality. I'm not saying that they canceled it all out either. They just didn't talk about it that I ever heard. And, but, how does something mutate automatically to form a system that is dependent on other systems? You know what I mean? It's like, how do you make that come together? Like having organs in the body that go towards the body functioning. How do you develop how do each of those organs develop from nothing? It's like, how does it make choices? I used to think, okay, well, how can the fins become legs? Okay, well, let's say the water evaporated from the river or the lake, and they were left to just flop around, right? And so they would, in order to try to find food, if they could survive, let's say it was a dolphin, okay? If they could survive with the kind of air that they have in the atmosphere outside the water, then if they were going to live, then they would have to get food somehow, and they were going to have to move someplace to get food, especially if there's no water, right? And so how does that effort get moved on to, well, I just saw the answer, I think, maybe. That effort can actually potentially be programming that can then give other fish in that circumstance, potentially, I'm just thinking hypothetically, the mind program of doing that, and whatever successes or failures they had could be part of that, right? And so because of that, they would maybe try different things, okay, and be persistent, and maybe their fins could get stronger, and maybe they could find their way close to a bush and chomp down on it and choke it down. I don't know. I never imagined it to this degree, but it's kind of silly maybe. But I mean, I guess you can. But see the clue that we got from Tiendo on this whole score was that they said that the next level removed the link between the animal kingdom and the human kingdom, so that people wouldn't be able to find it, and so they'd be puzzled by it. So I guess then my thinking that there is no way for that to happen is true, except for if the next level puts that link back in there. And then they would be able to see how it progressed, right, by using reverse logic on what Tiendo said about it. Now, maybe there's something about that I still don't see. So it was just a little bit of fun there to think about. But that goes with, because I was always trying to figure out how I can try to offer proof to somebody that in their upbringing or for whatever reason is of the mindset that there's nothing that actually created the planet and all its life forms and the elements that, and they're certain that there's nothing. Of course, it's illogical to, be in the fishbowl and think we can know what's possible outside the fishbowl. And that's who we are. We really are. We're very, very, as vehicles are very. If they're not being used, if they're not growing in school, which can becoming the catalyst or acting as the catalyst for those that are growing in the school of what to not become like, then they're not growing. Well, I mean, they don't have the potential to grow. Let me put it that way. I think that may be the best way to look at it, because, and that goes with the Revelations part that says, when he was talking to the 7 churches, 7 groups of believers, through John's writings, that John was instructed to share with those different groups, that it would be better if you were hot or cold, because the lukewarm are spewed out of my mouth. In other words, they become waste. They become waste. Where the cold, and the ones that go against the next level, can be used to help stimulate individuals becoming empowered by the next level mind, which is heat, is the strength of mind is a force, and that's why it's compared to being light energy, or it's frequency. Mind is. It's knowledge. It's information. It's true information when it's from the next level's mind. And then when it's from any other source, it's misinformation. But it's seeing the misinformation up front over and over again that helps us recognize what's not. What doesn't make sense as being the highest truth. And so that's what directs us to seeking for what is that highest truth. And in the human kingdom during this civilization, the best we can do is to find Tiando's information and apply it the best we can and as fast as we can and as thoroughly as we can. There's nothing holding anybody back in their relationship with Do and T. We're not forming relationships with the crew members. That's what the Catholics ended up doing, by making those pictures and statues of Joseph and Mary and Peter and Paul and whoever else, and so then, that was doing the very thing that in the first trimester for the 12 tribes of Israel, they were told not to make graven images of God. They didn't want you carving in the stone images of what God looks like because how it misrepresents the fact that God is living. And then, that, and to honor the true members of the next level, each one of them being a god to a human because they're evolutionarily above human, means to work for those members of the next level. And Do called that, he said the word worship really meant work for. And so that's where the Christians get off track when they think that they're sinners. Like the one individual I was listening to said that he was reading this part where Moses was saying when he's gone, they're going to disobey the instructions. I don't know if he said all. I don't think he would have said that. But I might be wrong about that. It just doesn't sound like Tiando's mind to say that all were going to do that. Because that would be like setting them up to fail. The next level doesn't do that. I know that. Because the instructions were meant to be followed to 100%. Now, of course, there's always going to be exceptions that are going to come up to challenge us. And, maybe not exceptions, but gray areas. Because the lower forces provide that. They have this question, well, is this the same as they were intending? Because, what if somebody comes into my camp and they start killing people? Why wouldn't I run up to them with a sword and try to kill them back? And, see, we're underestimating the next level by thinking that that's, that they can't stop that person from killing us. And that even if we are killed, that they can't take our mind and soul and put it in another vehicle right away so that nothing's lost. But what's gained is that we did our best to not give in to that animal belief that we are this vehicle. Because if we're trying to take this vehicle over, the vehicle is a horse, like a horse. And that was the one analogy that Tiando used, regarding the animal world, which he also used dogs as an example of the animal kingdom being like humans are to the next level, animals are to the humans. To where the animals that are domesticated or trainable to behave in the human's house, not chew up the furniture, not, piddle on the floor too often, or, I mean, I had a dog growing up that was a poodle that my vehicle's parents didn't cut the hair. It was a black poodle. And so she had this curly hair. Her name was Gigi. And she had this long curly hair, like dreads almost. But when one of us would come home and she hadn't seen us for a long time, one of the family members, she was so excited, and she'd be, like on the linoleum floor of the kitchen, she'd piddle on the. She would just leave a little bit of pee on the little. So she was never reprimanded for that. I don't think. Or even if it would just be a little thing, But I don't even remember that she was reprimanded for that. Because she was so happy. I mean, it's like, that's a good kind of piddling, Instead of like you're piddling because you're scared to death about something. Anyway, but, which that happens to people all the time. Or if they're, so inebriated that they lost control of their bowel. Or their bladder. But, okay, I've run around Jericho a few times, I guess. So I'm going to come back to the chat room. And Cub Doggy 1981, hello. I think I haven't seen you around for a while, so it's good to see you. And Scott Adcock says, hi Sawyer, watching from Louisville, Kentucky again. Good old Louisville, Kentucky. I've been through there, but I can't say I remember much about Louisville, Kentucky. Except that, I wonder if that must come from Louis the, what was that king? Louis the French king, I think? That St. Louis was named after? I wonder if it's the same person. I've been into Kentucky a number of times. I hitchhiked through Kentucky in 1975 with my partner trying to share information about T&O. I don't remember doing any meetings there. But somebody might have did a meeting in Louisville. If you look in the Heaven's Gate book, there's a document that shows where all the meetings were during the two times that meetings were held in 1975-6 and in 1994. I'm not going to go there now, though. Anyway, so, and Scott Adcock in the chat room then says, what was Doe's daily routine like when the group was living and working in their house? Well, I think their routines, T&O's routines were, I could be wrong about some of this, but were much the same whether they were living in the same house with students or not. Just if they were living in a house by themselves or just with a few students, there would be certain variations to that, perhaps, but other than that, I'm sure they spent a lot of time in their own quarters. They always had their own private quarters. And I don't know, I never saw their I don't think I ever saw their quarters where both of them were, because there's only one craft where I think both T and Doe were living in the same craft with us. And that was in Dallas. It was the last craft we lived in, shortly before T left her vehicle. And they had I believe it was a big room, like a master bedroom that was very large, and it might have even had sections in it. And I think I saw it at one time. Sometimes students would be asked to come in and talk to them. I think maybe I was asked one time to come in and, if there was a task that I was going to do that. And not everybody got to go in. I don't know if actually I did go into there, except when we moved into that place. But what would their routine? I mean, they didn't eat with us. But after T left our vehicle, then Doe did eat with us sometimes when he was living in the same craft. And that happened, I observed more of that than I did. He lived in a number of crafts with us in the same craft house. We called him a craft, but there was no decorations to make it look like outer space, like with pictures or anything, or any paraphernalia. It was made to look like normal for like a realtor to go through in case that had to happen, or a work person, because a lot of times we had like 30 or 40 people living in a location, in a big house that was like in the suburbs of like Denver or something. So anyway, in Dallas, that craft in Dallas was a suburban environment. It was a big place. It was the wealthier part of town. One of the wealthy parts. Well, not the real wealthy, but more of the upper class part of town. And upper class, I'm not saying that as a judgment that they're better than anybody else. No, they're not upper in that way. They're a lot of times worse off than a lot of other people because of what some of them have compromised in their justifications for supporting wars, and that's a big example right there, because not that somebody can't outgrow that. They could be right now, pro-war and get woken up tomorrow and grow so fast that they move past all the people that were anti-war people for years. So we can't judge anybody because we don't know what other people have been faced with in their genetics and their upbringing. And we also don't know when they can change and how much they can change. I forgot why I got into all that. So what else did they do? So I didn't observe them in their quarters. I know that sometimes we delivered food to their quarters on plates, and they would come out and talk to students sometimes. But they had instructions. Students had instructions not to go up to them if they were circulating around the house, around the craft. Because we didn't have casual relationship with them. But if somebody came up to them, even knowing that, they would listen to what the person had to say. I witnessed that a number of times actually. And then sometimes they would say in a meeting, they would reiterate that That's the behavior that we actually have with all of us. That if we don't have a task to do, and we don't have a reason to communicate, then we didn't communicate. We didn't walk around high-fiving one another or anything like that, or telling anybody did a good job at something, or we would talk to our partners about the things that we weren't doing that we could have been doing better, in our partner's opinion. And that opinion wasn't always straightforward to see as from Tiendo's mind. And so that stimulated potential for the partner to be defensive. Like, that's not from Tiendo's mind. I can pick my nose if I want. I'm not sure that was one of them. They did say that you should use the tissue when you pick your nose, and you should do it in the lavatory, in the bath chamber, which was where the lavatory was, or the sink, and the toilet, the commode they called it. They didn't call it a toilet; they called it a commode. They changed a lot of our language because it got us out of the habit of that programming. But it also showed that when we adapted to it, that we were working on it, because you have to change you have to kind of slow your mind down, when you're using new terms for things. But there were no punishments if you didn't use those terms. But your partner would bring it up to you because we were instructed to ask our partners for help if they see anything about us that is questionable, that might not be instructions or behaviors and ways that Tiendo would find favor with as being part of the graduation program, the process, the overcoming process, the process that converts the vehicle physically and mentally into a new vehicle. The new vehicle is actually a soul vehicle. A plasma physicality vehicle. That's a little bigger than the humanoid, dense physical vehicle. And so if a partner was defensive, then a little while after we got, the instructions to ask our partners for help in that way, Tiendo would get reports. And partners would write reports about what the other partner was doing that they questioned before they would bring it up to them. And sometimes Tiendo would bring that up at a meeting. And they would very rarely give names of individuals. They would generally talk generally about something. And then they would say that if the shoe fits, wear it. But it doesn't necessarily apply to everybody in the same way. But then they said that on lessons that didn't apply to everybody, they said there was no harm in taking it to heart and even doing a better job in that lesson. Well, let's say the lesson was to not have any thoughts about the past or the people in the past that you left behind. And so that anytime somebody slipped into doing that, they were breaking procedure. But if somebody could have been doing that a lot in their heads, and their partner would never know about it. Right? But then we had meetings that were called slippage meetings, where people were, Tiendo didn't come to those meetings, but they gave us the format for it, and then you would bring up, and this is very much like the confession. You're kind of getting it off your chest in a sense, but you're also, by exposing it, you're facing yourself with the desire to improve upon it and not repeat that mistake. That's missing the mark. It's like having a goal and missing it. And then, so Tienda would say at the slippage meetings, you also have to come up with not only when it's your turn to say what your slippage was to the rest of the crew, but give a remedy. So you might say, well, I'm not gonna read that book that's in our library, because whenever I do, it reminds me of this place where I lived, and that reminds me of the people I lived there with, and I start to miss them, or whatever degree that somebody went down that road. And it's not like that's bad or those people are bad, but that's not part of the program. And to become a new creature, it's even very sensible that you can't bring the old characteristics with you that are characteristic of that kingdom level that's different. Because the next level doesn't have relatives from their flesh. Their relatives are the ones that are committed to being in the next level and committed to their older member as their captain in all circumstances. Even if they become a captain, then the older member becomes like an admiral. That's the way Tiendo talked to us about. Do said that he was like an admiral and also called her like the chief administrator of the earth. Which he said that long after he told us that he believed, at least the first time I heard it, was long after he told us that she was the one in Revelation 12 that was depicted as the woman. And that she was his older member, his heavenly father. In the archaic records. I shouldn't say archaic really, but in the records, Doe would say it that way. He would speak about the Bible as records. It's good to not use that terminology, that religious terminology, because that stimulates, for those of us that have strong religious programming still in us, which we might not even know we have. I didn't realize how much of it I had. Even years later, I had a lot of religious programming. And even though I wasn't a practicing religion at all, I couldn't find something I liked about any of the religions. And I explored a number of them. I mean, I tried to see if they had something to offer me, but they didn't float my boat. I wanted something that was more real, and that's why I liked that book, The Scientific View of Christianity, that was written by, I think it was Mary Baker Eddy, one of the Seventh-day Adventists, or maybe it was a Christ scientist, or maybe it was both, the Seventh-day Adventist and also considered to be a Christ scientist. I started reading that when I was in high school, so it was my vehicle. So it was, just the way this vehicle was wired. But, so the Christians would think, what I heard these Christians talking about on the radio, was that they knew they were sinners, and that because Moses said that they would be breaking a lot of the instructions that he had given, that these individuals were taking that as, well, if God knew that we were going to break the instructions, then I guess there's nothing wrong with not following them, in a sense, right? that's the way they're thinking. And so they can then justify wars and weapons made to kill humans with, and all the other ones, in that list. Because what they believed was that, like Moses said, he was going to be coming back. Or what he said was the next prophet would be coming back. He didn't say it would be him because he wouldn't have assumed that. He wouldn't have assumed that he did the task to his older member's complete satisfaction, so that his older member, let's say he didn't do a good job. Well, his older member might have thought, well, I'm going to give somebody else a chance to do that task. And that wouldn't necessarily be a demotion, but it would be a chance for him to grow from the disappointment of that. So there is the sense of not doing as good of a job as we can do, even in the next level. I talked about that in terms of when some would go back, because they said that all the ones that came, all the souls that came, which could include people now. I mean, I'm talking about souls that are trying to get into many of the vehicles that can be listening to this broadcast or cannot be listening to this broadcast. They can have nothing to do with me or never even heard about me. And they could be souls that are trying to use human vehicles to take their next step, generated by the next level, not souls that come from the Luciferian camp, because they have their own agenda. It's not a next level agenda. But anyway, so I went too far down that little vein. So we didn't interfere with them in the hallway, but at least one or two times, Theodore said in a meeting that should be in those audio tapes, though we didn't turn them on all the time. That that you didn't approach them in the hallways. But T approached me in the hallways in that craft a time or two. I think 2 times that I can remember. Which was like a one-on-one with T, which was very rare that would ever happen. We had a lot of small groups with T. Because she was the one that gave the instructions, overseeing kind of the Neutral Lab and the Yeast Lab, the Nutrition Lab and the Bread Lab. Because at that time we were eating bread products. And she came to me and she said I looked green. She told me I looked green. Now, did that mean that I wasn't ripe? At the time, I looked back on it and I recognized that maybe it didn't even take me that long to come to this recognition that I I was kind of jealous of the ones that got to spend more time with T and Do, because we could see them in another room, that didn't have a door on it. Well, another part of the big living room, whatever. There's a lot of open air space in a lot of these places. High ceilings and things, and so they would come to work out notes with a group that was called Sat 3, which stood for Satellite 3. And sometimes we had a couple of crafts. And they were talked about as, Doe talked about them like as satellites. When we had students that Doe thought, or T and Doe thought, needed time outside the classroom, like Brent Odie, who had polio, a form of polio, that she got from a bad medication, by the way. She was having a lot of trouble. I mean, she wasn't, at the time, she was living basically in her scooter. She had one of those automatic, powered scooters, because she couldn't walk because her legs were so swelled up, her knees and her feet. And I can imagine the pain she had sleeping and things, but she had medications. I know she took progesterone and other things. So T and Do weren't against doctors and medications. But Doe was trying to, deal with things in a healthier way. Excuse me. Getting tired. By coming up with the Transfiguration diet. He said that T didn't need that experience. Anyway, so maybe that's all I'm going to do on that right now. Get back to the chat room. Well, I can say a little bit more, but because Tino told us what they did every night was go through each of us. Now, I don't know if T did that or just Do did that. But I believe they worked together as a partnership on this, so they probably both did it. But they would try to communicate with their older members, and that would mean T with Do with T. But since they were working as a partnership, Do and T with T's older member, which would be like me working with T, or a student now that where Do would be their father, T would be their grandfather potentially. It doesn't matter who it is. I mean, it could be one of the older member students, could be qualified to do a task to serve as the older member for some of the ones coming up now. I don't know how that could be configured. Because that's, in a sense, that's happening to all of us now anyway. I'm talking about individuals, that are going to become more and more committed to T and Do's behaviors and ways and tasks that they provided. And because there's no limit on growth. Because like they said, you could even technically grow past your older member. I know I kind of didn't really complete that sentence properly. It's part of my getting tired, I think. Okay, is there anything else on that? But other than that, they did the same routines we did for the most part, but not entirely. Like, you know, if they wanted to go out for some reason, they went out. You know, I don't mean go out on the town. Or they might have went to a restaurant sometimes. They would have done it if they felt like they had instructions to do it. And the reason why they might have instructions to do it would be to get a little further away from the classroom for their own benefit and also the benefit of the task that they were doing. They could become more objective when they're not subject to all our discarnates and our boogers, the Luciferian, space alien, fallen angel souls that are assigned to each of us. If they can be sensitive to those kind of influences. And then and so they would go out, and also to give a chance for the next level to work better with us. I mean, to give us some things that Tiendo don't need to experience. I'm not sure what those would be, but I do know that there were certain parts of the country that Tiendo felt like at one point or another they didn't want to go back to because it was too dense with the lower forces. And they said that about the Salt Lake City area, Utah. Interesting that Utah just had that 5.8 earthquake. And where Moroni, who is the individual that appeared in a vision to Joseph Smith, was on the top of the Temple Mount. That gold temple. And see, the temple was rebuilt already. The third temple. Right over there, I think. Because Jesus said it was going to be in a new land. A new nation. With a new tongue. New language. Anyway, and the... So when that earthquake struck, it actually shook the horn out of that, what they call the Archangel Moroni's hands. And it fell down onto a ledge of that building. So he was dethroned. The trumpet was taken out of his hands. In other words, Moroni isn't one of the angels of the seven trumpets. That's what that seems to be tailored off of. And the next level wanted to make a point, I think. So they made that earthquake happen there. I don't have any doubt about that. I mean, I could be wrong. But I mean, for the most part, I think that's probably what happened. They wanted to, that's part of this time of plague. This was all, Revelation 16:2 talks about this. And it talks about the two witnesses having power over the plagues. And it happens to line up with some of the plagues that were brought against the Egyptians to try to get them to willingly release the children of Israel. The children of the individual that was known as Jacob. So these Christian individuals then were talking about how, for them to think that they needed to earn their way into heaven was like not believing in Jesus, that Jesus was going to do that for us because he loves us. And yet we'd be worthless to Jesus if he fought all our battles for us. And that's not even consistent with what he taught his disciples. He said you have to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. All those things were hard to do with him, just like that's hard to do with Tiendo. The cross means it's the burden that it might result in people being seen as dangerous to the society. I mean, there's already people thinking that way. But that can become more prevalent. And so that's giving our lives. That's what the cross represents, is giving our lives, putting our lives in the hands of Tiendo. That's the fastest we can grow, is to say, the fastest we can desire to grow is by meaning it and saying to the next level, to Do, I want to be putty in your hands. Use me however you can use me. And help me have the strength to be of service. And to separate from the human kingdom and to forward my overcoming process. I'm not saying people should use those words, because we were never taught to use, we were given some affirmations, about 8 or 9 years after being in the classroom. We were given the 17 steps, but not to use as like a prayer. But they did recommend committing it to memory. I did, I think, memorize them all. They weren't that hard to memorize. But that was given in 1977, I think. Approximately. 7 or 8. Back to the chat room. So then, haha, makes sense, says Sour Croat Gamings. Okay, then Rat Salad says, so they ruled you. No, that's not really true. Because we weren't, there's a difference. Okay, does an employer rule their employees when the employees want to do nothing else but be an employee? They're not ruled like a dictatorial kind of rule. They provided the rules to be able to pass the astronaut training program in order to be given a task, just like astronauts do, just like people in the military. They have to follow all those rules, or they get demoted. They get kicked out. They don't get the good assignments. They don't get better rates and pay rates, or raises and responsibilities, and they don't get tasks. They don't get jobs to do for that employer. More ones, even special ones. More and more interesting ones. That's what happens to members of the next level that don't, and we're all potentially in different degrees of that when we're attempting to be students of Tiendo. Different degrees of application, because it's not a matter of just following the letter of the law. It's learning the intention between the letter and the law, because otherwise you can get way off track. If you just repeat the words, but you don't understand why those words were given, what they were going to accomplish by adopting them. Let me see if I can think of an example. So I'm just going to skip on to, so they gave us, sometimes they gave us something that was specific wording occasionally, and then but we didn't use that publicly. We didn't have any mechanism. Well, we did. If we were talking about, if we said if you said to your partner, I need to I'm going to go to the restroom, the partner would be responsible to say to that person, no, the terminology from Tiendo's mind is bath chamber. Now, does that really make a difference? Yes, it does. When you're actually applying for a highly technical task on a spacecraft, to where they want to know that you can follow instructions. They don't want you trying to make up your own routines. Humans think that they're free when they have the freedom to not have any routines. But they're not free because they don't know that they're being run by all the discarnates that use our vehicles. And potentially the souls that we'll call the space alien souls as well. The space alien souls definitely don't want anybody to pay any attention to Tiendo as a reality. And as a reality of being from the kingdom that created the planet and all its inhabitants. That kind of a reality. Let's go back to the so Scott Adcock says, did members have a hard time dealing with missing their family? Well, I know some did. Some did. Some had strong bonds with their family. I didn't have a strong bond with my family, so I didn't have any problems at all with being away from my family. I'd been living for 5 years on the other side of the United States from where my family was. And I didn't have any children, so that didn't weigh on me. And my partner actually, like my wife, I didn't ever have somebody that I was legally committed to. But I was committed to 2 different women in my life, before and after the classroom. But I don't have that now anymore. And I don't want that anymore either. But anyway, So I don't know how to talk about it more than that, except that one time Liv Odie met her brother somewhere in California, which she left the classroom to do it, and I don't think it was instruction for her to leave. So she got a lesson out of that, I guess, and but it wasn't the end of her, her that was a serious offense because of how it could have brought investigators to where we lived. And that could have meant, somebody would try to pull somebody out of the group. Adults, they were all adults. So nobody had the right to do that. I mean, there were two that joined when they were 16, but by the time I'm talking about, everybody was over 18, and one of those left less than a year. Well, no, it was a few years later, and she had more contact with her family during those years when the rest of the class didn't. But I think she was from a foster home, maybe, and her name was Jasodi. Last I heard, she was living in Texas. I talked to her on the phone in 1994, and maybe 5 as well. Anyway, so I imagine people did, because like when Tiendo sent back students to visit with their families in 1985, and then again Doe sent us back in 1987, approximately. From the second time visit, Arthodi decided to leave the classroom because he enjoyed being with his brother's family. His brother and his brother's family. I believe that's what he said. He was upfront about it, I think. And some people would leave in the middle of the night and they wouldn't say why. Tiendo didn't like that because they didn't know if they were going to go to authorities and, not that we were doing anything wrong. There was nothing to report that anything was being done wrong. But it could get, again, to an investigator that didn't know whether there was anything happening wrong necessarily, right? If they were hired by family members. And Junodi's brother did hire an investigator to find us. And didn't find us, and although he was in the same town where we were in Dallas, actually, I believe it was. When we were in that same town, but we moved right before they got to us. Got to where we were living. Or maybe it was the P.O. box that they got to. All right, I'm going to move on. Jay Pollock says in the chat room, does any class member stick out as being better at overcoming than the others? No, I'm not something that can judge that. There were some things that some had problems with and others didn't, I could see that, and they would talk about the slippage meetings, and the battles that they had. And so that's the only reason I would see what somebody was dealing with, unless Tiendo brought up something, and sometimes they did, for the whole class, to use as an example. But they didn't put people down by doing it. I mean, somebody could have felt put down. I guess Frank felt put down by Doe when he just started talking with this real low, different voice than he ever talked about. I mean, for 12 years or more, 13, 14 years, he was talking with his voice, his normal voice. And then all of a sudden in a meeting, he's asking a question with this low, like baritone voice. It was much lower than normal. We all noticed it. Well, I shouldn't say all because I'm not in anybody else's head. But I'm not that aware of things around me a lot of times. And I noticed it pretty obviously. And I remember, though, kind of chuckling about it. And then he might have called him on the spot. Or maybe not. I'm not sure what he said exactly. But he wouldn't have like said, Andody, get that booger away from you. Get that, Satan away from you. That's causing you to change your voice like that. When Andody wasn't trying to do that, but this was just happening to him. His voice was like getting raspy and breaking up. He couldn't he'd be struggling to say something, and then he wouldn't be able to get it out, like that kind of thing. And it became kind of a big problem. And that persisted with him for years after leaving the classroom. And he thinks that he was damaged in the classroom. But what was damaging him was that he was staying in the classroom when he didn't want to. Because he was, I believe, hoping that the individual he joined the classroom with, Chakoti, her vehicle's name was Erica, he wanted her to leave too. And he even talked about that. That there was a time when they did the visits, what he said was, if I remember correctly, that if she had given him any indication that she just wanted to stay visiting her family and his family in Canada, because they were both originally from Canada, he would have done it in a minute. So that friction that he was feeling is emotional friction, dealing with that, and which started at a certain point in a big way that became a test for him, which happened right after David Koresh and David Koresh's students and followers died at the hands of the ATF and the FBI. Including a whole bunch of kids. By setting the place on fire. I don't know if they had those fires ready to go or not. But you could see fire coming out of the turret. And there was a report that they had outfitted those tanks with fire something that would, I guess, put some kind of fluid in there or gas and then set it up. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. Anyway, but I don't know for a fact that that's what happened. But what Doe said during the meeting after that was that he wondered if his students, he didn't agree with David Koresh on anything. that I ever heard. And he talked about it a little bit, about David Koresh. But he did wonder if his students would be as dedicated to him as David Koresh's students were dedicated to him, to David Koresh, by being willing to die for what they believed. I don't really have any doubt that those individuals got a good grade in school, and it might have been brought back right away. There might be, some of them might be the same souls that were taking over your vehicles, that we want to take over, that are you. I don't know. I don't know what's possible in that regard. That could have been souls that were with Jesus as well. And Moses. I don't know where to... I don't have the capacity to draw the lines anywhere. But, so what Doe brought up in that meeting, that Ann Doherty was troubled by, and I was troubled by it too, at first, was when Doe said that maybe that's the way we're going to leave. See, he was looking for the way we were going to exit. The whole time. From day one, they were looking for their exit. They said it was going to be a spacecraft. Would come and pick them up. And it was. We just didn't see it. Anyway, but, when the Cocoon movie came out, that's when he decided to, soon after that, after T had left the vehicle, he bought a boat, thinking that we might go out on that boat and get picked up by a spacecraft, or I remember thinking, I wonder if we might end up sinking the boat, and dying that way. So I had it on my mind that, I was going to die the whole time. Even though when T and Doe originally said what we're talking about, they were saying that our vehicles didn't have to die to go to the next level. And they didn't think our vehicles were going to die to go on the spacecraft. But then they felt like they got an update to that. Even though they still didn't know for sure whether that would be the case. So they not played it, but they treated it as both were possible. But then when the David Koresh thing happened, then those started to wonder if having a rifle and having some ammunition in it, to where the authorities would know that, let's say we were living in a little group of believers in Tiando at the time, because I'm not forming any group like that, but if after I leave, if a group forms like that, I could certainly understand it, or even before I leave. There's nothing to do with me necessarily, but I can understand people wanting to form some groups, but and even holding meetings, public meetings or whatever that people want to do. There's no limits to what they can do to stand up for T and Do. What anybody can do, myself as well, but. Am I going to lose it? What was that again? I guess I lost it again. I'm sorry. All right, let me go back to the chat room. Maybe it'll come back to my mind. You're welcome, Scott, in the chat room. Hello, DJ Taconic. And Booster says in the chat room, "Hey Sawyer, who's that Barton guy that attacks you in the comments section sometimes? A former classmate?" And then Booster also says, "I appreciate how Heaven's Gate cult respected the free will of members." Oh yes, absolutely. And so yes, that's Carlodi, also known as Carlodi in the classroom. He joined in, I think, around August of 1994. I might not exactly have that totally right, or maybe even before that. But during 1994 time period, he joined. And I met him in the classroom briefly, I think. I don't remember that clearly. And because I was in a different group and I was in a different craft with some other students after he had joined. And so and he believes in everything about Tiendo and wishes that he would have left. I know he feels that way. Well, I mean, he used to feel that way. And was looking for them at the time, right before they left, even though he dropped out before that. Something in his relationship with Doe, having to do with something in his relationship with Doe. Maybe he talks about it on he's got a blog, it's called CRLODY or Carlodi.com. No, Carlodi.wordpress.com, I guess it would be. But, I'm not, I don't, he does say some things that are like an attacking kind of thing. Calls me a false prophet and things like that. It's kind of an attack, but I don't mind. I don't want it to. I want him to bring up examples of things that I'm saying that are easy to find and remember that Tiendo taught that I'm doing differently. Not differently, but, well, differently meaning talking against the things that Tiendo taught, saying something that's not true about what Tiendo thought and taught. Now, he doesn't know all the things that I experienced from all the meetings that I attended and, all the other things that happened before we were making tapes and even during we were making tapes. Because we were only making tapes during the meetings that Tiendo instigated. And sometimes they would tell us that they didn't want to tape something. That would usually have something to do with if somebody left in the middle of the night and they wanted to know if students had recognized that that person was dealing with something that, was leaning them towards taking that action. They gave plane tickets to people. Like Flexodi got a plane ticket. That was in the 80s. And I got a plane ticket. I got $600. Mark and Sarah got a car, and I could venture to say some money. Doe offered $2,000 to anybody that wanted to leave, but was staying in the classroom because it had become easy to live in that communal environment. That was very pleasant and clean and uplifting and interesting. They didn't want people to stay unless they were committed to continuing to work on their overcoming task, taking over the vehicle completely and thoroughly. Okay, so I'm going to move on to kill illusion. Collusion. Like collusion, right? Been watching some of your music videos. Astonishing. I don't even know where they are anymore. But I'm glad you like some of them. I have a hard time doing those kind of things anymore. I mean, I play with some friends. I do some things, but I don't like them. I don't know. But I still force myself to do them sometimes because I think sometimes there's some good lyrics in them. Anyway, I'm going to move on in the chat room. Jay Pollock says, great story about Frank. I was wondering what made his voice like that in interviews. I assumed he had a mild stroke or something. It just kind of started, I wasn't his partner at the time when it started, so I don't know if there were signs of it before I first noticed it. But I know I think he's better now because he's more, he's done the same thing that I did. He gave into his influences. And, but he's taken another step beyond that. And I don't know if that's what his head's at right now. He could have changed. But he was saying that Doe was becoming a little psychotic, I think, is what he said in the Heaven's Gate podcast. And there was no becoming psychotic for Doe. Well, that gets back to that because he first started to feel that because what he said, if I understand correctly, was when Doe suggested having that rifle. And I remember when Doe said that, I remember thinking, wow, I was a little bit shocked by that. And I thought, wow, what if, I remember having the thought, what would you do if Doe said that, he had instruction to kill somebody or shoot at somebody? I remember being really troubled by that. And I couldn't imagine it. And I thought, I remember thinking at first, well, I'll just deal with that when it happens. Because I knew when we talked about things that weren't necessarily put into motion. And he wasn't talking about shooting at anybody. He was talking about stimulating the government to bring about our exit, since it didn't seem to be happening for other reasons. And he didn't have instructions yet at that time to take it upon ourselves to do it. That only came after we did the 1994 meeting, where Doe said that he was the same soul that was in Jesus, where he wondered if that would cause Christians to try to, get rid of him or get rid of the students that were saying it somehow, which didn't happen. So that became like I think the way that Frank said it was the straw that broke the camel's back, in a sense. And he started to, wanting to leave. And then when he got a certain kind of, when his voice was going south, going bad, making those changes, I love that brother of mine. I'm not finding. I'm not. He's got a struggle. He's got a difficult task, and I think his soul is going to go back when he finishes. Well, I think he's one of the souls that's going to go back and have another opportunity. But the nature of the task is that we can get entrapped by the lower forces. But we always get future opportunities. And then we can get, once again, and then we get a harder lesson in order to conquer whatever it was that we didn't conquer the first time. And a harder lesson would be a vehicle that was a harder vehicle. Like my vehicle in some ways was kind of easy with a lot of the things. I always wondered why they talked about it as being such a hard task. That's because I wasn't doing it. I wasn't doing it to the degree that I needed to qualify. But I didn't know that. I was doing the best I thought. I was a little bit too full of myself in how well I was doing. But I wasn't trying to hide anything until I started to give into sexuality all of a sudden, and which is a long story. But then I saw that I had, I had no even desire to ask for help. It's like, so I had really sunk. And what Carlin actually told me, because he was in the classroom after I was, he said that Doe talked about me in that regard and said that the next level mind was removed from me. So that shows, and I believe that's true. I believe he's telling the truth about that, because Tiendo talked about how they would run influences away from us. That's like, giving us next level mind to try to combat those influences, those discarnate influences on us. Those boogers that were trying to influence us to become their slaves. T and Do don't have slaves. They don't want slaves. They don't need slaves. Because they can make robots. They can make slaves if they want. But they don't need to. It's Luciferians that need that. Because they can't because they're restricted to the human kingdom and the human kingdom technology and the human kingdom spirituality and the human kingdom religiosity. And not I'm saying they're not necessarily religious, but they certainly use the religions to try to entrap people into thinking they found the path, when it's at best one of the paths to the top of the mountain. And that to get off the mountain requires breaking all our ties with the human kingdom. And that includes seeing through seeing any value in the religions. But that doesn't mean the people that are in the religions are also all bad or all off track, because it's based on where they are in school. And they can skip grades, so they can bypass individuals that recognize T&O's information as true. But bypassing it would mean recognizing that T&O's information is true. You can't believe in Jesus at this time and be saved to have an opportunity to be on the crew of that individual older member, because you're ignoring the updates. And the updates are designed to be difficult to recognize for some. Depends on where they've grown in the past. I'm not putting myself on a pedestal because I flunked out of that classroom. So, but the comparison of any of us isn't between one another. The comparison is between us and Doe. That's where we measure ourselves, and we don't even measure ourselves. We don't need to have any judgment of ourselves or others. What we can do, though, to help one another, is point out when we're saying things that are different than what T&O are teaching, or that are contradictory to what they're teaching, whatever different form of different there is. But I mean, if we learned that her favorite ice cream was vanilla, did that mean that our favorite ice cream had to become vanilla? No, it didn't. And even by saying that, T&O didn't say that about vanilla ice cream. They said that about the Buzz haircuts. When Doe got his first Buzz haircut while I was still in the classroom. And we all had short hair, of course, and I had no desire to have long hair. But I remember I wasn't like kind of thinking about wanting to get a Buzz haircut. So I guess I was still attached to my hair. When Jim Odie brought that up in a meeting, he said, would I be, making my commitment to you by getting a Buzz haircut? And T's the one that said that we needed to make a commitment to Doe. Doe didn't. Doe knew that we needed to make our commitment to him, but he didn't want to ask us for that commitment, at least initially. So they came to us in a meeting, and T told us that Doe felt uncomfortable about asking for commitment, but that she was saying that it was our task to commit to Doe. See, they were testifying to themselves, to each other, not themselves. They weren't talking about how they were this highfalutin, God returning. The other of them revealed it to us. Both ways. Let me see now. Go back to the chat room. Then Rat Salad puts up a smiling face. Excuse me. And Joseph Nill says, have you ever taken hallucinatory drugs? When I was a youngster, in my early 20s. I don't mean youngster, like people now in their early 20s are youngsters. I don't think that way. They could be ahead of me in a lot of ways. But more experienced in a lot of ways that I'm not experienced at a young age. But it was in my high school days when I did 99% of the acid and the mescaline and mushrooms. Anyway, so Joseph Nill, and I quit before right after my first year in college at Beckley, West Virginia, I ended up quitting. I even quit marijuana at that time because of a supernatural experience that I had with my partner at the time. I don't want to talk about that now, but it's in my story, Sawyer's story, at sawyerhg.wordpress.com. Just search for Sawyer's story, or ask me if you want to know, and I'll send you the link to that story. And Joseph Nill says, "What is that? Nill or Hill? That's a Nill, right? What are your thoughts on cryptocurrencies?" I don't know. I don't put a lot of, I don't remember if there was something in the records that said that there'd be no more cash. I know, it talked about you won't be able to buy and sell. But to me, that's got more of a reality to it than the idea that I don't doubt that our cash will be going away more and more. I mean, there seem to be some pushes for that, considering how, pathogens of some sort can be on the money that's handled by each other. So I guess from a health point of view, it would be better to do everything with, swipe of a card. So, but I don't know. I don't know how T and Doe would think about it necessarily. So again, I guess I can't really say much about that. And Joseph Nill says, "Are there life forms and spiritual beings on the planet Venus?" I have no idea. I can't remember Tiendo saying that there are life forms in any particular planet, but it did say that there could be a planet that is in view of humans that have life forms on them, but that humans can't see them or any of their things that they have with them. They can't see any of the signs of actually a civilization can be growing on a planet that humans can see, but they can't see the civilization on it. Because they can change the frequencies, I guess, of light, so that we can't see certain things. And you see evidence of that with the infrared light, right? To where you can see at night. So that if it can be done that way, maybe it can be done in a number of ways. When we say what the next level can't do, then we know we're wrong. Joseph Nill says, I used to live in Beckley, West Virginia. Oh, is that right? I think you told me that before. But before that, he says, was there a lot of conflict with classmates, fights? Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call them fights. And it was only one time that I'm aware of where there was like a little physical pushing match between Code Odie and Alex Odie. And Code Odie left the classroom soon after that by his own choice. Well, he might have been... That's right, he was instructed to leave, actually, to be a part of a halfway situation in Dallas, where Brand Odie was at the time. He was having other problems. So let me see now. Why do your latest videos have the same title? Because I'm lazy. I'm sorry. I should be changing them. That means I have to go back because I didn't keep... I have so many notes I take, I lose track of them. And so I forget what I talked about. But I need to go back and change them and... or at least change the descriptions to reflect some of what's talked about. But part of me, I should make a point to do that. I kind of go through a couple times and I do it, and then I go back and I listen to some of the things and I look at the chat room and I see what was talked about in the chat room, and I put some clues to that in the description. And I'll try to make a point to do that. Thanks for bringing it up, though. I'm not saying you brought it up for that reason. Maybe you thought I don't know, maybe you thought I had another reason for it. I don't. Though I like, in a sense, just having a generic title that looks the same, because in case anybody's, paying attention to my titles, and my titles might be controversial, but like talking about the vax, for instance. But then I don't have to put that in there. I can leave that part of it out, so not to be flagged by any search engines, the bots that might do some of the searching out things that they can bring up community guidelines about, even if it's not officially in a community guideline. They're probably putting it in there about the virus. All right, so I'm going to go on to collusion. Can you talk about accumulation of sin leads to death? Well, yeah. I mean, if we keep on giving in to all our human behaviors and ways, then we don't become a member of the next level. And that means we get recycled. But humans aren't the judge of other humans getting to that point. We can judge the behaviors, I believe, but we can't judge the actual person, because that's not our job, and we don't really have the capacity. We don't know what they've been through. We don't know how they were raised. We don't know their genetics, and we don't know, we may see them on the outside, but they may have changed even though they might hold positions of power, and they may be talking to Tiendo, saying, how can is there some way I can serve you while being in Congress, even though my heart isn't into Congress. I don't believe in what they're representing. But if they bring that up to the next level, or whatever they call the next level, thinking of the next level as being among the stars and being creators, people that created something, the more specific the better in that. So it could even be, talking to Tiendo. We don't know that that the next level would have them do exactly what they're doing. That's why we can't, that's one of the many reasons why we can't judge one another accurately. But we can say that it's wrong to kill, and for them to support doing that is wrong for them to do. But we're not the ones that, there's no ramifications with us for that. Like humans would say, put them in jail or do something else, even, harmful to their vehicles. And that would be not something that the next level would have us have anything to do with. Maybe in the past they did. I don't know. Then Wristwatch Hater says, has the Chief of Chiefs ever contacted you or only Doe? No, not me. I doubt it. I don't know for a fact. The Chief of Chiefs can contact anybody they want to. They don't have to come across. They don't have to come over as the Chief of Chiefs. They don't have to identify themselves. I'm talking about like through a dream. Of course, we can't count on dreams as being reality anyway. But we can observe them, and we can have suspicions about them. Especially if we look at them and we see indications that they are representing things that Tiendo taught. Then Wristwatch Hater says, do you still get interview requests from reporters? Actually, I have one I'm scheduled to have in the next few days with somebody that wants to make a documentary that he wants to put on Amazon Prime. That's all I'm going to say about that. We're going to do the interviews remotely. And Joseph Neal says, thank you for doing these live streams. You're welcome. It's my pleasure. And Joseph Neal says, do you agree with the stay-at-home order that politicians enforced? I'm kind of glad that it happened. And I can see that it would be part of Tiendo's mind for it to happen, even to stay safer away from the virus. We know viruses do spread by human contact. I know that. I've experienced that in my life. But it doesn't mean that everybody is affected. And so what I think has been wrong is that the lockdown could end. It could have ended certainly by now. Maybe even well before this. in many places. Now, if they're still having a lot of problems in the city, then I would think, keep the lockdown happening. But there's a lot of things about the way things have been handled that I don't agree with at all. They should be teaching people how to eat for health and longevity. And it's not hard to do that. And, teach that in the schools. But they're going way overboard with this. Way beyond what is necessary, I believe. And so they're working for their other agendas. I'm too tired to keep on go through much of that. Then wristwatch hater says, maybe if you know their next level name. Oh, to Jay Pollock. Oh, because he said, Jay Pollock said, if we talk to specific members of the graduating class other than Doe, do you think they can tune into our thoughts? I don't know. But I do know that if we want to be a student of T and Doe, then we don't, we don't want to foster a relationship with fellow students. I mean, even the older member students. Because I can't speak to each person and where they are on the scale of the next level's little hierarchy. I shouldn't even say it like hierarchy because it sounds like the human hierarchy, and they don't have the same kind of vibration as humans have, even though they know they're greater than humans are. I'm going to have to get another drink of water to finish. And I can also use the exercise for a second before I go to... Right, we don't know their next level names. They might have new names, the classmate. The same with T and Doe, but T and Doe were the names that were to use now. Excuse me. So I don't think T and Doe want us to try to start up relationships with classmates, or the 38 or the 4 or the or me, for instance, which some have expressed in terms of like I'm not an older member. I could have been. I had the capacity to, but I didn't pass that grade in school. And I can see why, for a number of reasons actually, not just one. But I'm not going to go into that right now. But Doe is our connection. Doe is where our commitment needs to be to. Becoming wanting to have communication, try to have communication with the students is like making them into the saints that the religions worship. And so you got people that sit around and go through the rosaries and stuff, and they think they're talking to Saint Andrew or whatever, one of the disciples. And that gets them off track. That's like fostering misinformation in their computers. Because that's not the way it works in the next level. We don't have the same kind of relationship with students that we have with... Doesn't mean we don't like each other and enjoy each other's company and can grow from one another by having different experiences with one another, whether it's in the next level spacecraft or it's on Earth. The same opportunities for growth occur, but they're just different kinds of opportunities because they don't have mammalian structures and behaviors and ways. Then Wristwatch Hater says, maybe if you know their next level name, J. Pollock, next level name. Yeah, I don't think so. But anyway, then J. Pollock says, true, who knows what the new names are, or even if there are names. Sometimes I'll talk to Norodi, but who knows if she listens. Okay, so I guess I already addressed that for whatever it's worth. But I think they do have names, because Doe talked about he has a name in the next level. So I would imagine that the students would also have names. I could be wrong about that, though. And then Joseph Hittnell says they should also teach about how to help your immune systems. They do. Right. Maybe you're agreeing with me. The government, they could have closed down the schools and started teaching the kids that. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with reading and writing and arithmetic. But what about the college students, What's more important to learn about? Our immune systems or calculus? Well, sure, maybe they can make a lot of money with calculus, but that's not what's needed now. We need to, try to use these vehicles for as long as we can to learn lessons, because otherwise you don't learn anything if you don't have a vehicle. Okay, so then Wristwatch Hater says, Doe said in a video that T didn't want us to know her real name. Okay, I don't remember that clearly. If you're able to easily find that in the name and the timestamp, I'd like to be able to see that. I don't really remember that, so I'm going to leave it at that. And then Wristwatch Hater says, if you die, how would we find out? I don't know. I guess these broadcasts would stop. Wow. I'm really close to keeling over. So I've really enjoyed spending a couple hours here talking about Tiendo and related subjects and a few unrelated subjects. And I hope we get to do it again. I don't know if I went through that whole, I started to talk about those 19 objects. And then I guess something that 21 Borisov is doing. It's changing and it's putting out carbon monoxide now. And those 19 objects are called centaurs, but I don't understand much about them. And anybody learns about them, send me a link. I'd like to see it. And then something about also I learned from Coast to Coast, I guess it was, that in the Roswell crash there was some like 4 technicians that ended up dying years later from some infection they got from the spacecraft or from the bodies that they were putting into body bags. I was just thinking about something, but anyway, I'm not going to talk about that right now. So, DJ Taconic, yes, good night, and you're welcome. It's my pleasure. Hope I went over some things that were beneficial, useful to you all. And until I talk with you again, hasta la vista. Well, good night.